Welcome back to Silent Sales Machine Radio. We are your co-hosts. I'm Brian.
And I'm Robin Joy.
And this is Coach's Corner.
Hi, everybody.
So we are back to normal podcast sort of content.
Right. We were doing this series on competencies, and that, I think, went really well.
Yeah, it does feel sort of freeing and, what are we going to talk about this time?
Yeah. Back to that.
At the same time. Whereas before, like every one of those was sort of structured. We knew exactly what we were going to be talking about.
Well, interestingly enough, we usually have way more things to talk about than we have time to talk about them. So during that time, we were like, all these things, and now we have to pick one of those things. That's all right. Let's get into it.
Here's the good news. We have a virtually endless supply of questions that we typically get from our coaching clients, which is kind of how this whole podcast thing got started.
That's
anyway.
Right.
Like these common questions, why don't we hop on to a podcast and cover them and give everyone in the community some of that value. And so that's kind of what we're doing today. And I want to start this off, Robin Joy, with every Monday, I overhear you typically doing the Kickstart Bootcamp calls.
Yes.
And depending on which week it is, there's either one, but there's usually two. And they're at different points in the process. But I've been hearing you a lot lately. I've been hearing you lately speak a lot about how important the brand name is on a listing. And I know that we've all heard it and said it and, preached it and all that, but I thought it would be worth bringing up again because there are people who have been doing this business for a long time who still don't get it right.
Right.
So we want to make sure we get everyone
it can be an accident. Yeah.
At ground zero. Let's get this fixed now.
And that is what I tell people. Really, the first habit you want to get yourself into when you're looking for ACEs, no matter if it's just one that's not really going to count because you're just trying it once, or if you're, well into your business and you've got a strong foundation, always, 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 always check the brand field on the listing, not just the brand that's in the title or the brand that's in the picture, but the brand field. Well, Amazon said, this is the brand. Okay, that needs to be the brand that matches the picture and the title. You call that kind of a triangle, right? The title, the picture, and the brand. They all have to match, right? Makes a little triangle. So, yeah, that part is really, really important. A lot of people, Amazon's really cracking down. And, companies don't want you to sell their brand under, another name or spell it wrong. And a lot of times people are just doing it to get around a restriction or something. And you don't want to be involved in that at all in any way. Anyway, it's very, very important. And even with coaching clients, when they bring me some ASINs, first thing I ask them, what's the brand on that ASIN? If they don't know, I have them go back and check that first because it's that important. I don't care how much profit there is or how great that listing looks. If the brand's not right, you don't want to be in there. It's very, very, very important.
I think you need to pick and choose your spots.
Yeah.
Okay? When we talk about the typical approach that we do with the Replens model is it's low risk, low investment, and high chance for success. And the risk is somewhat on a sliding scale. And we will frequently defer to the business owner, which is you, for your Amazon business, on where that risk, how much risk you want to introduce.
Right.
However, to quote Jeff Schick, a question for you would be, are you okay with this being the last ASIN that you ever sell? Because that's how important the brand being incorrect is.
Yeah.
And there's just no tolerance for risk in that space, not when it comes to the brand.
Not by Amazon. Yeah. That's a risk of losing your account, not a risk of not making as much money. So yeah, we do describe that sometimes when you say, okay, I'm not as risk averse as most people. I've got some cash to burn here just to make sure I get this right.
Cash to burn.
Well, some people kind of, they're willing to put in more money to make sure it moves faster.
Yeah.
So that's perfectly fine. And you can choose how much profit you want to get, how much risk you have of losing your money. That's one thing. But the risk of losing your whole business, the brand is what you're going to worry about there. The brand needs to be the correct brand, and it needs to be spelled right. And of course, it needs to not be generic anymore. Amazon's changed the rules about generic. There are generic listings out there, and there are reasons to use generic when you're creating a listing. But if you did not create that listing, you will not be able to put that in your inventory. So don't spend your money on it. You'll get an error that you won't be able to overcome. But that's not the only thing that we're worried about in the brand. So.
Yeah, I think there's other brands out there. In fact, I saw something in the MST community recently where, people kind of feel upset. They feel, well, they're doing it, so I should do it. I should be able to do it. And, whether that's a generic listing or they're making a branded box and putting their own products somebody else's products in their own branded box, and you think that's okay, it's really not. Like eventually, if the listing was created wrong, the person who created it, they're going to have, things to answer for. And you could have things to answer for from the actual brand owner on that, whether it's the brand that's in the box or the brand that is the box or whatever. Just make sure that you can source every single thing on that listing. That's the most important thing. Make sure that you can source everything on that listing and that it's a brand that you are authorized to sell in. And like I have seen some third-party sort of private label listings out there that look like I'm approved to sell it, but I know better. I'm not hopping on anybody else's private label listing, because we have gotten those IP complaints.
And the brand is one way that you can tell that. If it is a private label listing, it may be some national brand that's in that listing, but there will be things that you cannot provide on that listing, and that may be the box. And we're not talking about whether that's okay or not on branded bundles. There's training and pack, and there's a workshop going on, and several things in this community that can help you understand how to do that in a way that won't get you in trouble. But when you're looking at replens, those are not the listings you're looking for.
Those are not the listings you're looking for. Right.
Yeah, and that's one really easy way to tell, hey, this is a private label, and I'm not going to get on it because the brand is, instead of Hershey's candy bars for Hershey's, it might be Robin's candy bars. Because
there's 2 candy bars of Hershey's and 1 whatever of Robin's.
Yep.
And they label it or they brand it as Robin's.
Just stay away from those.
That's trouble.
Yeah. That's not the listings that you want when you're doing replens. And this podcast is going to be about replens. So, just make sure that brand is right. And, make sure you have a valid listing. And on that point, to have a valid ASIN that you can look at for testing, you want to make sure you have a valid source as well. No third-party sellers.
Again, source for everything that may be included in that, whether it's a 2-pack, whether it's some sort of bundle that's not branded or whatever it is, make sure that you can supply everything in it.
Yes.
And I used to think, I'll just reproduce that, whatever that item is, with somebody's logo on it. And, our lawyer was like, absolutely do not do that. Because that's exactly how trademarks come to be, right? Okay, good. Well, always check the brand. What I hear, even when I'm overhearing your one-on-one coaching sessions, sometimes is you're like, oh, that's awesome. That looks great. Oh, those pictures are phenomenal. Oh, yeah, that profile looks good. What's the brand? Oh, the brand doesn't match?
Moving on.
Out.
Yeah.
All those other things, regardless of how good they look, do not matter.
So again, if you're looking to be less risk averse and you take a little bit of chance, don't do it in the way the listing was created. No matter what any other sellers are doing, whether they're able to or not, don't put your risk there. Put your risk in, am I going to lose my money on this? If you're willing to lose a little more money to take a bigger risk because you might get a bigger reward, great, do that. But don't mess with the listing itself being created in a way that it doesn't work for you.
All right, well, let's now jump right to a question, actually 2 questions that came from a relatively new coaching client.
We got some really good questions from this person. We're just going to pick out a couple of them.
Yep.
Yeah, so the first one.
The first question is, what is the actual definition of replens versus OA, RA, wholesale? Those 4 things was what he was asking about.
Right. And that might be the way he posed the question, but I'll tell you, the replens to me, see if you agree with this, replens to me is an item that you can purchase at regular price or the same price this week and the next week and the next week from a reputable seller, someone who's authorized to sell that to you, and sell that matches up with an ASIN that's correctly created on Amazon, already there, an existing listing, and you fill that listing from that or regularly,
Yes,
right?
right.
So versus wholesale or RA or OA, I don't think it's a versus. What that source is, whether you buy it online or buy it in the store, doesn't make a difference to whether it's a replen or not.
I think there's just some, the lingo is hanging around in the community, RA versus OA and versus wholesale. Every single one of those strategies or methods of reselling on Amazon is an arbitrage play. It's all arbitrage. We're buying, everything is arbitrage. So whether you're going into the store to purchase it, that is a replenishable item, that could be considered RA. But I think some of the old school definition of RA is go into the store to scan UPCs and or looking for clearance items. Right. And that's not necessarily we've done some of that, but I think there's a lot of RA available out there that is not clearance items that still works great for replens.
Absolutely. I think that, the most replen sellers don't source in the store scanning items in that way. Some of them might. But OA stands for online arbitrage. RA stands for retail arbitrage. To me, both of them are retail arbitrage. One just happens to be, we use it to say go to the store as opposed to buy online. And as far as wholesale is concerned, there are a lot of things called wholesale that aren't really wholesale. And you be very careful if they're saying they're wholesale, because there are wholesalers out there who are not authorized sellers. So be very, very careful if you're buying from there. And a lot of times it won't work because you have to buy quantities and you can't test small like you need to do for replens for the replens business.
So what I like to say is items available at full price. And by the way, the items don't have to be consumable.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So
I had this coaching session last week where someone was saying well, I didn't even look at that item because it didn't seem like it was consumable, so it wouldn't be a replen. And this is, I think Jimmy Smith used to use the example of a hammer all the time.
Right.
So you can source and sell hammers. And it can be replenishable for you. Not necessarily that the same customers coming back over and over again and buying the hammer over and over, but there's so much demand out there for hammers that you set it up and you will sell hammers for and you'll keep replenishing to different people.
I don't know that I've ever bought a hammer and used it up and had to go buy another one to replace it.
I think the very first hammer I ever bought is still in my tool bag.
I suppose it happens in some industries, but but I do know that hammers can be replenishables because I'm replenishing. The customer's not necessarily.
It's not that the customer's replenishing; it's that you are replenishing as the seller, right?
Because more and more sellers are coming to you looking for that hammer.
Yeah. Now, so the other question I get...
more and more buyers. I said that backwards.
Oh, yeah. I thought I knew what you were saying.
You knew, but I said it wrong.
The other thing to keep in mind is that items available at full price. Does that mean when it's on sale one week that I shouldn't buy it?
No. I've got a whole thing to use caution if it is on sale, because if it's on sale for you, it's on sale for everybody. However, if it happens to be on sale, but it's one of my replenishable items, that's just a bonus that week. I do my assessments on the regular price of the item, whatever it's going to cost me next week to buy it. Right.
So if from a progression standpoint, what we talk a lot about are viable ASINs, testable ASINs, replenishable ASINs. Viable, we talked about before, brand is a big part of making an ASIN viable. Right. Once you've checked the box for viability, then it becomes testable. And then when you test...
it could become testable.
Could become testable.
It could be assessed for testable.
And then if you are testing it and that item sells at or above your target profitability your minimum profit number, then it becomes replenishable. Right. That's a replens for me.
Yes. Exactly. That's exactly how...
And I'll keep replenishing it until it doesn't meet the criteria
anymore,
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's pretty well described, but it is a question that we have a lot of times in Kickstart because, this is kind of a new concept to some of them. Yeah, so I'm glad that we were able to kind of let everybody know what we're talking about when we're talking about replens. Just to mention, Jimmy Smith has a great course in the Proven Amazon course about replens and what they are and how to use them, and it's really, really in depth. He's just updated it with a whole bunch of new ways to source.
It's really the gold standard in understanding how replens work. And we typically, when we get a new coaching client, that's the first place we'll send them to start doing some work before we are able to meet and cover some of those things in advance, so that we have some, at least, things in common. We've got some premise in common before we actually start with coaching.
Yeah.
So great course.
Yes, agreed.
So the next question that we actually got from the same coaching client.
Yes, he actually had a lot of really good questions. We'll probably be bringing those in.
As soon as we saw the list, we were like, oh, this is going to be a gold mine of content for us to cover.
Absolutely.
Here. So, but the next question was, is there an ideal target price or target resale price for replens items?
That is an excellent question.
I love that question.
And you've kind of changed your tune about that recently. You used to say pretty clearly all the time $25, right? I
used to say $25 and up kind of was my ideal because of my own personal experience.
Yes.
Okay, so what happened was after we had established our book of business and we had several hundred replens items, we didn't really go back and do something I'm pretty passionate about today, but in terms of the continual operational improvement is something that I like to do, or the know your numbers session that I do with a lot of coaching clients, where we dig in and we get all of the pieces and parts related to the gross profit for on average for every ASIN that you sell.
But this is usually after they've built a foundation, right?
After they built a foundation. So when we went and did that on ourselves, our average sales price was just over $15.
Oh, early on.
Early on, right? Yeah, 12 to 14 months in. We've
actually done the exercise a couple of times.
We've done it multiple times.
Where we have increased our average sale price and our average profit actually was the point of that.
Right. We just didn't have enough. I mean, the percentages were great.
Yeah.
It just didn't scale well for when we wanted to fully outsource prep and ship, or when we wanted to fully outsource any other part of the business, because, we may have been making 60% ROI, but it was only $1.75 of profit.
Right.
So,
but I got to say, just to be clear, because this is something I think gets mixed up. When you're building your first foundation of your book of business, you'll be just like us, and you'll take what's coming to you until you get a mass that you can have some averages that you can deal with. Then you can go back and make those profits better. But you got to have something to work with. So, and that's exactly what we did.
Well, that's where I was going with this. Today I say $25 and up, because it saves us a little bit of time.
Yeah.
That said, we've got several coaching clients who have kind of focused in on these very low cost items, whether it doesn't have to be from the dollar store, but there are some items from the dollar store. Sure. But there are plenty of dollar store type items at Target and Walmart and the national and even regional chains that we are already shopping at that are very low cost, and they typically sell in that $10 to $15 price point. And when you're first starting out, if you don't have the necessity to have everything outsourced right away, which is what I typically will coach people to do, do as much of this yourself as you can in the beginning.
Right. You don't coach them to outsource in the beginning.
Right. I don't.
Unless they don't live in the country.
I coach them to keep as much of it in-house as they can, because you want to get, we've been talking about for the last 7 weeks or so, you want to get you're the generalist. You have to be spinning all the plates. And I think it really helps you to know how to do all the pieces and parts of your business before you outsource them, so that you know what to look for when things aren't going according to plan.
I think so too. I mean, I really kind of almost encourage people to keep those dollars low. You're not going to be making a whole lot of money until you get, a mass of inventory anyway. So let's make those mistakes on small dollars. And we have a lot of people who are starting with, maybe they don't have much money to start with, and they need that money back before they can get more inventory. So break it up into smaller chunks so that you can still build some consistency, and you won't be sitting there waiting, and you can learn and get experience on those small dollars. It's perfectly acceptable. And we have a lot of people who do that.
I was going to say it's worth stating again.
Yes.
And so you did it twice. I'm going to do it for the third time.
Okay.
Whatever comes to you that meets your profit criteria in the beginning, you should take. Like, you shouldn't pass it over.
You should test.
You should, well, that's what I mean. Take it as a test. You should absolutely entertain that for your business. Mm-hmm. And then once you have your, the machine is well oiled and you've got a full understanding, then absolutely go back and retool that if you want to, or start at $25. A lot of this has to do with the capital that you have available. Right. If you're trying to do this on $100 or $200 a week, mm-hmm. You have limited capital. You have to focus on these lower cost items.
Mm-hmm. But that capital will build if you focus. It does. Yeah. If you focus on those lower cost items, and then all of a sudden you'll be up to $25 within months.
Yeah. It's just the buy cost, right? You're going from an average buy cost of, $3, $4, $5 to.
And we're absolutely talking about averages here.
Oh, yeah. This is on the
average. You may have a $25 one and a $2 one and a $30 one and a $90 one. I don't recommend, I guess I've said this quite a bit too, I don't recommend that you put any more than about 10 to 15% of your, I think 20% would be max for me, of your inventory in a shipment on one ASIN. Mm-hmm. Whether that's because you went too deep or whether that's because it's too high of a price, deal with the money that you have. It will grow, and then those options will change for you. Yep. But if you put it all in one ASIN, you're just, something happens to that ASIN and you're in trouble.
Well, as long as you have the proper expectations for yourself, right? Don't go into it thinking, yes, I have a Replens business, because you have 2 or 3 really good ASINs. Mm-hmm. That's not how that game works.
Right. You need to build that foundation.
But that's okay too. You don't want to, like Jim says all the time, you don't want to pass up the $20 bill laying on the floor. Yeah. Right. So take what comes to you for sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then over time, you can do this continual operational improvement. You can improve your numbers. You can improve your sales price, improve your profitability. Right. After you understand how everything works, it's a great time. The whole point of this is you don't need to know everything, every aspect of the Amazon business before you actually pull the trigger, as we say, on sending in test items, right?
Yes, absolutely. And you will get to a point where you have a minimum of profit percentage that you will take. But when you're beginning, you're not at that point. And I don't want to see you passing up a $5 bill because it's not a $20 bill.
There you go.
Right?
I like that too. Because time is of the essence.
Yes.
We got to get this going.
Those $5 bills will turn into $20 bills as you work through the process, right?
Yep. All right. Well, there was 3 great things we just covered there. We're going to wrap this up the way we've wrapped up every other episode.
Let me guess.
So far, yes, we have a quote. Well, I think we're in, at the time of this recording, week 2 of the regular season of the NFL. And historically, I have not been a big fan of this person who this quote comes from, just because he plays for a rival team. Right. Even though
actually have respect for this guy.
Tons of respect. Our quote to us.
If we're playing against him, not so much.
Quote today comes from Tom Brady. Yeah. And we played, the Broncos played a lot of games against Tom Brady, but I will say this, most of the time we had Tom's number. So I was kind of happy to play against Tom Brady, but a lot of other people don't like him because he's just that kind of He's always good. Winning. He was always winning. People shoot for the underdog. They like to root for the underdog, right? Tom Brady's not the underdog. So,
well, what's the quote?
Sorry. Here I go. To be successful at anything, you don't have to be special. You just have to be what most people aren't. Consistent, determined, and willing to work for it. No shortcuts.
No shortcuts.
No shortcuts. Yes.
Yeah. There really aren't any shortcuts to the business we're talking about, your Replens business. You just, you got to get in there. Some people may call it paying your dues, but I think it's just, gaining experience, just like with anything else. It's tough. It sucks being the new guy, but if you can overcome that.
Well, let's just break this down for a second.
Okay.
The last part of what he said here is, and willing to work for it. Mm-hmm. So the whole willing to work for it is why this Amazon opportunity exists. It's available for everyone.
Yes.
Because why? Because there's no system for it that has taken all of the elbow grease out of this.
A machine can't do it completely by itself.
If you are willing to work for it here in this space, then you can come build a successful Amazon business. So, hey, we check that box, willing to work for it. We've talked about consistency a lot.
Yes.
Right. And so consistent, if you're willing to work for it and you're consistently willing to work for it.
Yes.
Then what happens is the first 2-3 weeks seem like normal. Oh, but then you start getting discouraged. We see this a lot. I can't find anything. It's not working the way I thought. I haven't found my golden ticket. I want to, please, will someone just show me how to use a tool to make my life easier? Right. And I think then the other piece here is determined. Yeah. You have to have that determination to keep coming back, even when you're getting your butt kicked.
Yes.
Right. And say, okay, I'm rolling up my sleeves again. I'm going to do this again this week.
Yes.
And even when I'm not getting any results, so many different things we've compared it to. But
yeah, absolutely. And I've been saying too that I've found that the people, and we've worked with quite a few people, and there's not like a secret or anything. The people who find success are the people who find a way.
Mm-hmm. That's a great quote.
Find a way.
I should take that quote from you. The people who find success are the people who find a way.
And well, it's true. I mean, different things are going to come up with all of us, and we're going to have to find a way to get around those obstacles. And those who do find success, and those who don't are still looking for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. This is a great quote. We know we have to work for it. We got to be consistent, and we have to be determined, because times will get tough, right? Times will get tough. And really what we need to be good at is just knowing that times are going to be tough, and we're going to have to find new creative ways all the time.
Right. And essentially, the thing that we have to get good at is testing more ASINs. Right?
Test more ASINs. Oh, I see where you're going with that. Let's go test some more ASINs.
Thanks, everybody.
See you soon.
Hey, before we let you go, we have a special segment that we do once per week with our good friend Jeff Schick from jeffschick.com. He's a legal and policy expert on all things Amazon, Walmart, and other e-commerce platforms as well. He's always got some great stories and pieces of information for us. So, Jeff, what do you got for us today?
All right. So this one comes from Lewis. He's one of my paralegals on the team. And the topic is speed kills. So a lot of times when people get an account health violation, they think their immediate gut reaction is, I need to take care of this right now. So, and even Amazon will sometimes tell you, you must address this right away. So in general, a lot of times what we advise people is that speed is not necessarily the most important factor when it comes to dealing with an account health violation. There is one exception to that. That is restricted policy violations. If you receive a restricted policy violation, Amazon policy states that you must close or delete the listing within 48 hours of receiving the notification, or your account can be suspended. Lately, we've had 4 people suspended within the last 2 months here, and all of those were because they did not delete or close the listing within 48 hours. Of those violations, all 4 of them were for products that did not contain the restricted ingredient. But because they didn't close the listing, Amazon suspended them for violating the restricted product policy. So for the sellers who received the notification and did close the listing within 48 hours, which is about 20 of our clients, the remaining 16 or so did not get suspended. And they still are not suspended. They just have been dealing with the violation that's on their dashboard. So that's one exception to the speed kills, which is restricted product policy violations. You should close or delete within 48 hours. But for everything else, generally what we recommend is to take your time, figure out what's going on. So if you get an authenticity complaint or an IP complaint, the first thing you do should not be to immediately reach out to Amazon. It should be to collect your facts. So for instance, with like an IP complaint, our first thing that we always do is we analyze the claim. Is there any validity to it? So if there's validity to the claim, then that changes the whole workflow of what we do. And we come up with a case-by-case scenario on those cases. If there's not validity to the claim, then we reach out to the brand, we explain why they're wrong, and then we go through our normal workflows. But what we don't recommend doing is immediately reaching out to Amazon, certainly not accepting the violation, because if you're not in the wrong, acknowledging the violation is just going to put a mark against your account for something you didn't do that you could have otherwise fought. Similarly, if you are in the wrong, it acknowledging can be detrimental to you from a legal aspect if you're later included in a lawsuit, because an acknowledgement saying I agree that I violated the policy when the policy is that you're accused of infringement, for instance, means that you're telling Amazon I infringed. And if you get sued by the brand for infringement, that now gets entered into evidence and you could be asked, by a judge to read out loud, please read what you clicked on Amazon. I violated this policy. I infringed, and that would obviously be very detrimental to a case. So that's, what Lewis wanted people to know is, take your time, reach out to experts, find out what needs to be done first for these cases rather than jumping right into them. Similarly, like I talked to a seller yesterday who'd received an IP claim and it was a valid IP complaint. And his first question that he asked is, so should I go ahead and email the brand and ask them to retract? And my response to that was no. And he was shocked. He goes, why would I not want to retract it? I said, because if you reach out to the brand when you actually did infringe, you're now opening the dialogue for a settlement because you potentially owe them money because of the fact that you infringed on their intellectual property rights. And by reaching out to them, asking for retraction, two things will happen. One, you're now putting yourself right on their radar to require an escalation. And two, they're not going to retract, because to retract would be they would have to tell Amazon, we filed this complaint in error. And as we're looking at this together, you and I both agree that you infringed. So they didn't file it in error. There was nothing wrong about what they filed against you. And so what we've seen sometimes is people that jump into those emails to the brand or jump into the appeals or acknowledgments to Amazon sometimes cost themselves real dollars later, because if they end up getting sued, that gets used against them. And so we did have a seller recently who she was really adamant that she wanted the violation off her account. So she started emailing the brand, even though we told her, hey, this is a really bad idea because you did infringe on their IP. And so she kept emailing them. They started saying, you owe us money. She said, no, I don't. I'm not going to pay you. They basically filed a lawsuit against her in federal court. She then was forced to show up. She did settle the case for about $20,000 with them because she had infringed, and they did not take the violation off the account because it wasn't in error. So what she thought was that she would get these, I think they docked her 25 points. What ended up happening is that she still lost the 25 points and $20,000. And so, yeah, it just goes to show, speed can kill, and you got to know what you're doing. It's better to be slow and do it right than rush into something and do it wrong.
Right. I think, it may be difficult for a lot of sellers, new sellers, and even experienced ones to keep calm whenever an issue comes through on the account health. But it is important to kind of take a step back and realize that, as you said, better to do it right, but do it a little slowly versus trying to go fast and do it wrong and cost yourself a lot of mistakes. So
exactly.
It's always a huge peace of mind for me knowing that I work with you, on my account health as well, that I've got you if I need help with anything, because that allows me to sleep a lot better at night. So if anybody is, worried about rushing into things or doing things the wrong way, definitely recommend checking out Jeff at jeffschick.com. The link will be in the show notes. And we'll talk to you next week, Jeff. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.